Thank you. Well, and I might reintroduce Bess with her new post-marriage name of Van Zandwyk, which is I've just learned the pronunciation of as well. So I'm really honored to be kind of doing this on behalf of Bess. This is just a last minute change, and she is sorry she can't be here, but had an urgent personal matter to attend to. So I'm just reading the report that Bess has written. So after decades of advocacy from the NFU Women's Caucus, we were happy to write to the federal government praising their approval of a national childcare strategy and $30 billion to fund it. NFU women members were invited to meet with both Federal Agricultural and Agri-Food Minister Marie-Claude Bibeau and senior policy staff for the Minister Myriam Monsef, Minister of Rural Economic Development and for Women and Gender Equality upon their receipt of the NFU's letter. The meeting with Minister Bibeau provided valuable insights for the minister. She heard about the unique childcare needs of women farmers, rural families, and shift workers, and was visibly moved when she heard how many farms and ranchers are now women-owned and operated. We discussed flexible approaches to childcare with the minister, including on-farm au pair or temporary foreign workers who might bring their own children, with a special emphasis, I might add, from Jen Fenning, who is the chair of our migrant worker subcommittee, who spoke to that issue quite a bit of the potential challenges with it as well. Paid caregivers from within the family. Also the possibility of farm families forming cooperatives for paid child minding, suggested also home-based daycares and rural and village-based daycares. Those are just some of the very many suggestions we submitted during the meeting and also in writing afterwards in a written report. The Women's Caucus also presented the opportunities arising from rural childcare, which could lead to more jobs in rural communities, more women entering into farming, and we also provided a list of practices that could be avoided. This would be examples of this would be funding to corporate daycares, increased imbalance in gender dynamics, etc. The Women's Caucus also met 3 times this year. In addition to discussing the work of the caucus, we shared personal stories and struggles. One topic raised at the annual caucus meeting, sorry, I just skipped away from where I was reading here. I'm sorry. One topic raised at the annual meeting was, how does climate change affect you as a farmer? Many of us are motivated to farm for food sovereignty, connecting with the land, building community, and taking action in the face of climate change. Our role in changing the Canadian food system is meaningful to all of us. As Women's President, Bess attended the Canadian Area Conference of the Associated Country Women of the World, the ACWW. The NFU has been a long-standing member of the ACWW, and it was a good meeting, and they were happy to see the NFU in attendance. Women in the NFU are taking on many other roles as well. Many of us are engaged in NFU's policy and action committees, from climate to farmland to mental health. Some of us are leading our regions across the country, either as regional coordinators, as elected representatives in a variety of positions, or as very active grassroots members. A number of us are heavily involved in Farmers for Climate Solutions, both as NFU members and as farmer leaders in our own right. NFU women were also involved in presenting climate recommendations to MPs across the country, leading up to the budget announcement this year. We stressed recommendations outlined in the NFU's groundbreaking Tackling the Farm Crisis and Climate Crisis strategy. They were well received, and we were pleased to see the federal budget include many of our recommendations, as well as the funding needed for their implementation. Other members' engagement on behalf of women and girls has included Nettie Weave's work with the UN FAO's CFS voluntary guideline on gender equality and women's and girls' empowerment in the context of food security and nutrition. Our members are also involved in Livia Campesina's plans for the Day of Action Against Violence Against Women on November 25th, 2021, as today And as Diane mentioned, we'll be reading a bit from the statement later on today, as well as issuing one of our own, as this is also the beginning of 16 days of action on gender-based violence ending on December 10th. So we'll be doing some more work around that in the next 16 days as well. We would also like to thank the following women for serving as regional women's advisors this year. In Region 1, Karina Phillips. In Region 3, Arwa de Groot. In Region 5, Karen Klassen. In Region 6, Betty Tournier Daniels. In Region 7, Toby Malloy. And in Region 8, Julie Enman. As well as I'm listed there, the National Women's Vice President, myself, Coral Sproule. But I really wanted to say a special thank you. And I don't think that Bess is necessarily here, but if she is listening, I just wanted to say a special thanks for all of the work that Bess has done. And I know she's had a lot of changes in her community in her own life and has given a lot to this position. And it's been a delight to work with her and look forward to continued work together. Thanks, everyone.
Hey, thank you, Coral, for that, stepping in at the last minute and for delivering that report. I'll now ask Stuart Oke, Youth Caucus President, to present the youth report. Thank you.
Hi, everybody. It's a pleasure to see lots of your faces, even if it is only over video chat. It's nice to take a moment to connect with everyone. For those of you that, oh, and a good reminder for everybody to turn their cameras on too, as I see faces popping up. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Stuart Oke. I've been the youth president for the last few years. And my pleasure to talk about youth activities for this year. You can read in the convention materials my formal report, so I won't read that out for you, and you can read it on your own time. But what I do want to do is highlight a couple things not mentioned in detail in the report, but that are important to focus on. One is that last week we had our annual Youth Caucus, which is an opportunity for young farmers to get together every year and to talk about our concerns from across the country, and also as a chance to get together and discuss shared priorities on how we might work together to go about making farming easier for new and young farmers across the country. So it was a really engaging conversation, and is actually the first caucus I've been to where there were more people that I didn't know than people I did know at it, which for those of you who are familiar with youth organizing in the NFU, it seems like a win. Because normally everybody knows everyone in the room, and while it allows for intentional conversation and depthy ones, often it's not an opportunity to welcome new people into the space. So we had a wonderful conversation and did some brainstorming, and were able to get to know each other better, which is one of the objectives of the caucus in the first place, is to build solidarity amongst each other despite being from all over the country. So that's the first thing I wanted to hit on, and we'll be sure to include some of the reflections coming out of that conversation in the upcoming UFQ post-convention, where we can more thoroughly discuss some of those pieces. But the other thing I want to, and forgive me while I just navigate the screen sharing settings here, the other thing I want to talk about in more depth is the NFU Youth Report, which for those of you also that have been keeping tabs on this project, is a multi-year endeavor. The report, the work first began on it about 5 years ago, with work around trying to understand the barriers that new farmers face and who new and young farmers are today. And we worked in partnership with a couple people to disseminate a survey across the country and to try and answer that question. And so the results from that survey fed into this report, and over the years it has evolved with the times and worked to include some of the political analysis and organizing principles that the NFU youth have adopted over the last several years, and you can see hopefully the report the report cover here on my screen, which is a photo that we took at the 2019 Youth Convergence, which brought farmers from all over the country together to train and develop shared political analysis on a variety of farm issues affecting young people today. And I thought maybe I could just read the intro here because it's a lot more eloquently written than I can be off the cuff here. So bear with me. This report has evolved over several years with the help of many young farmers. It is thanks to the tireless work and passion of these people that this report has evolved from an idea to its final form here. To those who researched, worked, advised, and consulted on its concepts and messages, thank you. In many ways, this report began in response to multiple intersecting crises. Crises of declining numbers of farmers and farms across the country, of an aging farmer population without new and young farmers to replace them, of deteriorating rural infrastructure, of cultural decay, of political division, and of inequity. More recently, the gravity of the climate crisis has called into question the viability of the current farming system itself. Farming is already difficult, unpredictable livelihood. The climate crisis is exacerbating these challenges, and the worst is yet to come. As this report is published, we are well over a year into a global pandemic, almost 2 at this point, that has impacted every aspect of our society and highlighted the inequities within our food system. Canadians are quickly becoming acquainted with the problems inherent in a food system that treats food as a commodity, migrant farm workers as expendable, and land as a resource from which wealth can be exploited. Amidst these issues, it is clear to me and many of the young farmers seeking to produce food and build a just food system that a truly holistic approach to food system transformation is needed. A grassroots approach rooted in systemic change and envisioned and enacted by diverse coalitions of people is the only way meaningful change will be achieved. It must be an approach that recognizes all people across all food systems and meets them in the context in which they live, providing solutions which work for them. This report lays out a roadmap for such a food system from the perspective of new farmers and how we can go about building it together. So the report, happy to announce, has now been released to the public and is available on the NFU website, where you can find it and read the full 30-some page report on your own time. I will just highlight a couple of the key pieces in the report, maybe just as a teaser, and encourage people to take a look on their own time and to share it with others. First, the report takes a look at the context that we're in right now and tries to set the stage for why we've found ourselves in a position with overall declining numbers of farmers, and also some of the factors that have impacted our agricultural and food systems up to this point. It takes a look at the farm squeeze and the issues of static net farm incomes, which NFU members will be very familiar with this net farm income graph, which explores net farm income compared to gross farm revenues. And then it goes into an exploration of agroecology. And for those of you not familiar with agroecology as a concept, it's a holistic approach to food production that uses and creates social, cultural, economic, and environmental knowledge to promote food sovereignty, social justice, economic sustainability, and healthy agricultural systems. It's not just a set of farming technologies, but it's an integrated approach to food system transformation that requires a structural shift in societal power and economic relations. It puts the theories of food sovereignty into practice, and it presents a solution to the multiple crises outlined in the second section of this report. And just a brief infographic that people can explore on their own time. So we lay out agroecology as a concept and explore a little bit what that means in the Canadian context. And then we break down the survey that I mentioned we conducted a few years ago on who new farmers are and what are some of the responses that we found most illustrative of the barriers that farmers face today trying to get into farming. And so some helpful statistics for everybody in there in our advocacy work. And finally, the final part of the report lays out a series of case studies of both farmers and organizations that are modeling some of the changes that we think are necessary in order to build that more just and sustainable food system that we discuss in the report, and including all NFU members from across the country of different types. And then we end the report in a true NFU fashion with a number of policy recommendations to act on in order to build that transformation. And you can see some of the topics and themes here, which we try to cover in a one-pager type format, which you can print off and use for your own purposes as you pursue work over the course of the year. So I'll stop my share there. That was a very quick scrolled through look at the report, not meant to cover all the bits, but just meant to draw people to the NFU website and promote some of the work that has been done by more people, certainly than me. Many people over the years have had their hands on this report, and just wanted to thank all of them in their contributions to getting this piece of youth work out after many a year of work. And finally, because I know I'm going along with my time, just on a personal note, this is my last year in this role, which I have very mixed feelings about leaving, but feel very optimistic that leaving now, the organization has never been stronger and is helmed by incredibly intelligent and competent people, both at the board and staff level, and wanted to extend a thank you to my partner, Nikki, who is often absent from these spaces, not because she doesn't deeply care, but because she's often doing the farm work that I am found neglecting by participating in these spaces. And so, well, often people acknowledge me as the youth president. There's really two youth presidents, and one of them is Nikki, because without her, couldn't do this work. And so wanted to acknowledge her, and also wanted to take a moment and thank Jessie MacInnis, who has also made this work possible, who's the youth VP. Thanks, Jessie. You're invaluable, and it's been wonderful to build a friendship with you over the last few years. Yeah, and I can feel some emotions starting to come up, so it's a good time for me to segue out of this. So want to thank everybody for the opportunity to give to the NFU, and I've always been very guided by the principle and the adage of not, don't ask the union what it can do for you, but ask what you can do for the union, and something that I've lived to strive in my commitment here, and I'm not going far, but happy to let somebody who is younger now take over this new role, and for new youth members now to take leadership. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Diane, and thank you, Tim. Maybe, Tim, I'll just let you know when to put the slides, if that's okay. Hi, everybody. Oh, but you can start the slides now. Sorry. I just mean I'll let you know when to go to the next one. Okay, perfect. Thanks. Hi, everybody. My name's Jessie, and very grateful to have been the IPC chair for another year. I'm also happy to report that there's a new incoming IPC chair who was this past year's co-chair, Amber Dick, and I will be her co-chair. So, you know, keeping it in a circle, but yeah, please get involved with the IPC. So just while we're on this first slide, I wanted to remind everyone that the National Farmers Union was actually a founding member of La Via Campesina, and it's really this relationship and network that we are trying to uphold through the International Programs Committee, and challenging ourselves to live up to the aims of this wider social movement, namely achieving food sovereignty through agroecology. So with that context in mind, the IPC had a very busy year this year. The photo on this first slide is some of us who participated in the COP26 proceedings just a couple weeks ago. This took place on November 6th, which was the Global Climate March, and there were some marches all over the world, and you can probably pick out some of us in that photo. I think there was over 150,000 people there that day, so it was a pretty amazing experience. Okay, next slide, please, Tim. So this year, I'm just going to go through a few of the major highlights for the committee, although there was a lot that probably isn't going to be said too. And also to start out for context, the photo that you're seeing here was also in Glasgow over the last few weeks. A couple of us had an opportunity to meet and chat with women from the Zapatista movement in Chiapas, Mexico, who visited with Via Campesina members during their cross-European tour. They traveled by boat to Spain about 3 months ago, and they were visiting different organizations in different countries to talk about their struggles, the development of their autonomous regions, and we talked about their, autonomous food system. It was really incredible. And now, just as a fun fact, there are 5 autonomous regions of Zapatista peoples in Chiapas and over 350,000 people that are serviced by their self-governing structures. So pretty incredible. Over the last year, the IPC has been really involved in the UN Food System Summit counter-mobilization, both through the Via Campesina and the coordinating committee of the Civil Society and Indigenous Peoples Mechanism, the CSM. And I'll probably just refer to it as the CSM going forward because it's going to come up again. It was really a challenge to stage these counter demonstrations given the ongoing pandemic and the need for social distancing. A lot of the counter mobilization was virtual, but the IPC and NFU members were really outspoken about the corporate co-optation of the UN Food System Summit, the lack of transparency of its proceedings, and the exclusion of farmers and peasants committed to agroecology and food sovereignty. And the IPC created a video before the summit actually took place to kind of voice some of our displeasure. And the actual UN Food System Summit was held on the 23rd of September. Interestingly, the entire summit itself turned from what was supposed to be like a week-long massive event at the UN to a one-day online only event. So its power was significantly diminished. On that day, NFU member Nettie Weeb facilitated the People's Kitchen Counter mobilization, which was a North American online event hosted by the National Family Farm Coalition and other partners based in the US. So the Via Campesina North America also put out a really great video about the UN Food System Summit and the counter mobilization if you want to learn a little bit more about that process and how terribly fraught it was. The next major item, as you can probably see from this photo and the one I just showed, was that several IPC members were among the NFU delegation that traveled to Glasgow and really added a progressive farmers response to COP26. We had the opportunity to take part in a lot of really vital movement building activities with other Via Campesina members, including with folks from Organización Boricua in Puerto Rico, Confederación Paysanne in France, COAG in Spain, and the Land Workers Alliance in the UK. Unfortunately, a huge gap that we noticed was the fact that a lot of our comrades from Via Campesina organizations in the Global South were unable to attend due to the ongoing vaccine apartheid and really restrictive border access into the UK. So that was something that was always on our mind and is reflected in, I think, in a lot of our analysis from COP26. But we were able to take part in something called a People's Summit organized by the Civil Society Coalition of COP26 proceedings, and we were able to speak on many panels. We also took part in a couple of disruptive actions inside the COP26 proceedings themselves to really just voice our disappointment with the processes and the corporate co-optation that we were seeing. Of course, the conference inside and outside of the formal spaces was really filled with challenging learning and unlearning moments for all of us as settler farmers. And we really look forward to carrying on those conversations and actions, particularly regarding Indigenous rights. As an output from the COP26, myself and Madeline Marmor and Taryn Giacomini were part of a group that created a Via Campesina video similar to the Food System Summit one that I just mentioned, that kind of unpacked the false solutions that were being proposed in Glasgow. Sorry. So moving along. Oh, sorry, back slide, Tim. I'm still on that slide, thanks. Moving over to another UN process that I mentioned earlier, the civil society mechanism, which is part of the Committee on World Food Security, a multilateral process within the FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization in Rome. Nettie Wiebe has been involved with the CSM for a number of years now. And in February, she actually chaired the CSM forum. And among the other work in the CSM this year was pushing for stronger terms of reference to protect and advance the rights of women farmers under the CSM's terms of reference for the Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment workstream. And just last week, actually, Nettie and I represented the NFU at the North American Gender Equality and Women's Empowerment consultations for their new Policy Zero draft. And finally, for this slide, just a brief update about Via Campesina North America. As with many social movements, struggled to mobilize a lot during COVID-19, but NFU members have had really strong presence on the subcommittees and the youth articulation of the Via Campesina North America. Some of those include the Peasant Rights Collective, the Climate Justice Collective, the Youth Articulation, as I mentioned, and the Women's Articulation. And all of these groups have been quite active, especially in relation to the UN Food System Summit and COP26 counter mobilizations. All right, next slide, please. So just to touch on, there are two working groups in the International Programs Committee right now. There's the Indigenous Solidarity Working Group and the Migrant Worker Solidarity Working Group. The ISWG has been holding really incredible and well-attended monthly discussion groups on Indigenous sovereignty, land back, and the truly horrific undocumented deaths and burial sites that have been uncovered at the residential schools across the country. And in 2021, in June 2021, the group helped produce a press release expressing their grief in solidarity with all Indigenous nations and survivors. And in September, the group put out another press release to honor the National Truth and Reconciliation Day on the National Day of Action for Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women and Girls. And coming up, in collaboration with Ocean Networks Canada, the ISWG will be holding a webinar in January on discussing the similarities in traditional Indigenous land and water food sovereignty. The ISWG has also been meeting periodically with Dawn Morrison of the Working Group on Indigenous Food Sovereignty to discuss a partnership to produce research surrounding land and water grabbing. And these discussions are still ongoing. And finally, the members of the group have been in discussion with the Relational Accountability for Indigenous Rematriation Collective for an in-person encounter sometime in the next year. Next slide, please. And then to the Migrant Worker Solidarity Working Group. This year, the group drafted and had the board approve updated terms of reference. And they've also been having really great, lively monthly discussions and have produced a number of articles in the Union Farmer Quarterly this year. In particular, the working group has been working hard to advocate for an overhaul of Canada's temporary foreign worker programs and improvements to migrant worker living conditions and labor rights. In September, the working group submitted a grant proposal for $15,000, which would support a cross-Canada community organizing initiative over the next 2 years that would address migrant farm workers' rights and inclusion through collective mobilization with progressive and allied farmers. So the goal of this project would be to achieve greater inclusion of migrant farm workers within the NFU and to secure their rights and justice for all of those who are working on farms in this country. So if that's successful, hopefully that will begin in March. I just wanted to back up before I go too much further because I realized I forgot a few funding pieces that I'm not going to go through our budget because we did that at the caucus meeting, but just a few updates about some like major wins on the grant front, which was exciting. Our contribution from Inter Pares went up this year, which was great. We got some funding from Why Hunger, which is a very progressive food justice NGO based in New York, to support NFU work that specifically engages women, youth, and BIPOC members. And we also had a transition of coordinators this year. In July, we said goodbye, or not really goodbye, but see you around, to Martha Robbins, who was our wonderful coordinator, and now Dave Thompson, who has been very active with the Migrant Worker Solidarity Working Group in his capacity as the NFUO Farm Labor Project Coordinator. He is currently the interim coordinator for the IPC. Okay, final slide, please. So as has been mentioned a few times already this morning or this afternoon, depending where you are, today is the day to raise awareness, give visibility, and stand in solidarity to denounce violence experienced by women, children, and 2S LGBTQA+ folks worldwide. Dave is going to drop a link in the chat where you can read the Via Campesina's call to action. It also includes some banners like the one that's on the screen right now if you're interested in sharing them on your social media pages. But I do really encourage you to check out the declaration just to get a sense of where La Via Campesina is coming from when it talks about popular peasant feminism, or what it means in a food sovereignty context to demand an end to violence. It's a significant day, and I think it's something that we should keep in mind throughout the proceedings of the rest of the afternoon. And a quick reminder that if you are interested in joining the IPC, Dave's email is on the screen right now. I think it's also in the chat, and we're open to everyone that's interested, and we can help clarify acronyms because there's a lot of them, and give you some links to interesting readings, and we have really great discussions. So please join us if you are at all interested. And I think that's it for me. Thanks, everyone. And I don't know if we have time for questions, but I can take them if there is time.
Sure. All right. Thank you very much, Jessie. Tremendous activity and important work from the IPC committee. Great.